Good afternoon, folks. Welcome back. Today we're going to do something a little different, which I'll show you in a minute. But we're going to take a look at workers. But first of all, the very first thing, if anyone was watching last night, we solved the issue of the very slow slowdown when basically we were drawing conveyor belts. Now I tracked the issue down and I shall show you what the issue was. So it was basically when I was adding this mesh spline component. Now the problem was that the collision was on while I was drawing the spline, and that was absolutely crippling performance. So the solution to this would be that when we actually draw the spline and the spline is complete, we switch on collision, right? But we leave it off while we're building it. So that immediately negated the slowdown. Okay, so that was the issue that we sorted last night. Now, one of the other things we were doing was having a look at the options, and I shall show you what I've got on with that. We now have the options screen. Still needs a bit of tweaking, but in the main it's working. Okay, we have all our settings. We've now updated some of the buttons here. And the voice obviously probably won't be used, could be turned into another one, but you can see that we've made progress with the options. And now we want to have a look at adding workers. Now, workers will not be added so that they'll have meshes and they'll walk about and stuff. Okay, that's not really the purpose of the workers in this game. There's going to be enough stuff happening in the game with all the conveyor belts going about, all the other stuff, the spaceship taking off and landing, and all the other issues that we probably don't want to have workers walking around. Now, it is possible to do that, and I may actually go and implement it, but for the most part, workers will just be like a concept issue, right? Where buildings will have a number of workers working there, which will affect the amount is processed. Hi there, Matthew. Well, I hope I teach you something today. So what we're going to do is we're probably going to have some kind of component within a base building, right? We're going to have an actor component, and then we're going to have, and the actor component is going to store the workers, right? So that's going to be one of the concepts we look at today. Matthew, is there anything in particular that you want to learn in Unreal Engine? I don't mind showing people things if they chat to me in the text and I know what they want to see, right? So we're going to have a first look at workers. Now, some of it has actually been, or at least the theory has been implemented, right? Because what we can do is we can start up the game and we won't be able to build anything until, well, actually, can we click on this for the moment? No, we can't. Right, okay, so we're going to have to fire probes, okay? So we're going to fire some probes and that's going to give us a miner, and then I'll be able to show you the concept behind the workers. Right, so our little constructor comes out and he starts building the mine. And this is, actually we're getting to a point now where I'm going to have to automate the testing a bit on this, because otherwise it's going to take me ages to test anything. Right, so as you can see from the miner, you can see that there's a workers, right? So this at the moment is just hard coded, so it doesn't actually do anything, but the point was to show the concept that for it to run at full speed, it needs a full complement of workers. Or we could say that it needs, like, let's say 80%. We can work on that later. We can think about that later. But the concept is that the speed of the processing will be affected by the number of workers. Okay? Now, this is tied into the spaceship and the trading. Okay? So when we hit 5, that's a bit ambitious as a first, if you're learning about Unreal Engine, to be honest. Kofi, hello, how are you today? Basically though, I've got something that is kind of similar. So if you notice here that this is the buy and sell, okay? So if we buy, we have this. Now the rocket just basically sets an amount that it's got. And one of the items in here is going to be workers, right? And the only place you'll be able to get a worker is from the supply ship, okay? Now, obviously things change, ideas change, it might become a little bit more complex, a simulation than that, but at the moment the idea to drain money, or drain, well, let's call it money, right? All resources, let's say, are money in this game, right? And from that, what we can do is the workers drain the resources, okay? And the money. So we could set, like, the amount of space credits at, like, for a worker at, let's say, 10,000. Okay? Now, you'd obviously have to balance it, but we can look at that later. The fundamental thing is that we pull stuff out of the economy by making the player spend it on workers, which are unavailable for them to actually construct themselves. Okay? That's the idea. And to make them have to buy the workers, then we tie the speed of the processing to the number of workers they have. Okay, that's the concept here. Okay? Now, before we start this, I'm going to show Matthew that you can draw a grid, which means fundamentally means that I have plots of land, because these have a position. Now, if you were to then, like, make this rotate so that when you hit a certain point, basically the grid overlaps with itself, then you've basically got a planet, and you don't need it to be round. Okay? So yes, you can kind of do that. So the next point is, and if you guys don't know about this, you should. Okay, because this is an important day. It's a special day. It's the first Tuesday of the month, and that means we get free stuff from Unreal. And as you can see, I'm actually adding something to the project at the moment, which means I can't show you. And I was hoping it was done, but it's not. And well, we'll just have to let it do its thing. But anyway, for anybody that doesn't know out there, we get free stuff on the first Tuesday of the month. And today is the first Tuesday of the month. So head on over to your Unreal Engine library, check out the marketplace, and just scroll down a little and you'll see all the free stuff. Today, I think we have this storage house set, which gives us like lots of boxes and stuff, which I'm interested in. Not really interested in anything else. There's a MySQL thing. There's a cartoon water shader. There's an RPG toolkit. And the last one is, it's a big office. There's like loads of office stuff, right? And that's the 5 Unreal things, or the things that Unreal are giving us this month, okay? So I was hoping I could show you, but as I said, it's in the middle of downloading, so it's basically stuck. So, back to the project. So, we were working on this last night. We've changed some of this out to actually work, and this now does the keybinds for us. So, as you saw earlier, that's all working now. I can add or take these away as I request, as we add buttons, etc. to the interface. And now we're going to create a worker. So we're going to get into blueprints, and we actually have, I've set this up. I can't believe I've set this up. So what do we have in here? Yeah, I kind of thought that, nothing. And our struct worker. So, yeah, this isn't a worker. This is actually the number of workers required. So this isn't for an individual worker. This is more from the point of the component that we attach to a building that's going to store all the individual workers, okay? So I'm going to rename this actually, because calling it worker kind of doesn't make sense. And we'll call it building workers. Call it building workers, okay? And you'll notice that this struct only has, this struct is related to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here, right? And I'm actually going to create a new folder. And I'm going to call it individual workers. Okay? Now, this, we're going to create a struct. In fact, let's do a little bit of stuff here for Matthew if he's still here. Okay, what we're going to do is we're actually going to create an enum. Okay, so we come in here, we're going to create our enum. E worker speciality. Now, we might actually not require this because we might actually have it already as part of our buildings, right? So what I mean by speciality is if this worker works in a refinery, or if they work in a fabricator, or if they work in the smelting, or if they've got a speciality of a particular building, okay? So this enum is probably not required. But, okay, let's build this out as if it's like RimWorld or something, right? So what we'll do is we'll do one that we probably will need for this. So basically we could say E worker 6. Now this isn't going to control anything, but basically we can use it just to differentiate. So we can say male and female. Okay, so that'll be that. We'll generate these as we need them, okay? So the next thing we'll do is we'll create our struct. And struct, and we shall say single worker. Okay. And we shall give this worker a name. We're probably going to create a data table with just random names. Right, so this is just going to be name. Then we'll have a new variable called sex. And this one is going to be of the type E worker sex. Okay. And then we could have age. And that's going to be an integer. Right, anybody else want some? I mean, as I said, if you were to make this like RimWorld, you would put in all the different attributes, like whatever they are. Like you could have strength, intelligence, whether they're greedy, whether they're not greedy, whether they're injuries, whether, you know, you could add all this into this struct. Okay? So basically what's going to happen here is if the spaceship decides that it's going to supply workers, we can basically create the worker with this struct, okay? So we could obviously maybe put something like the hours they work, like if it's 9 to 5 or if they do night shift, blah de blah. You can do all of that stuff in here. You can add the variables for that as part of the structure, okay? As I said, we don't really want to go too far. Probably a name's fine, sex is fine, and age is fine. We don't really need to do much more than that. I mean, I wasn't even going to take it this far. It was just going to be either a worker or not. But for the purposes of the tutorial, and if we wanted to go a little further, we could do that, okay? So we've got our individual worker, and our individual workers will go into our worker component, which let's say is our little bubble of workers, okay? And the building will have a maximum and minimum of workers that determine the process speed, okay? So this is getting a little bit complicated to explain here, but fundamentally this is what we need in here. As I said, let's see if we've got, we'll call it speciality, right? And I'm pretty sure we have E building type. There we go. Right? So there's the different building types. Okay? So we'll be able to set these up to say whether or not they're good at refinery, working there, working there, working there. Now that might just give them a bonus, or it might not, right? Or we might limit it to say that if they work in a smelter, then they can only work in a smelter. Or if they work somewhere other than their speciality, then they only work at 50%, let's say, right? So these are all options that are open to us if we do this. Okay? So we can save that. This worker speciality, basically we'll leave it empty just now. It'll probably get changed to something else. And that'll be that. So let's do something that would help you guys if you wanted to do like random spawning, right? So what we'll do is we shall actually create we're going to have to create another struct, okay? Yeah, we're going to have to create another struct. And this is going to be struct worker name. Right, now the reason we're going to have to do this is because we're going to save names in a data table, but we're going to have to know whether it's a female name or a male name. Okay, so we're going to open this struct, then we're going to have name, which is going to be name, and then we're going to have the sex of the name, and that is going to be of the type E worker sex, and we save that. Okay, now what we can do now is we can create a data table which is in miscellaneous, and it's going to be based on our struct worker name. Okay, that. So we call this DT worker names, and we can add. Right, we'll do 12. Okay, so let's please our Matthew. There you go, Matthew. Oh, you've got a double T. Okay, but we better not insult you by spelling it wrong. There, this one is going to be Jim. These are all male, that's fine. Next thing we'll do is say Scott. And obviously Kofi is definitely going to get in there. And then we'll have Brian. And then we'll have Pete. Then we'll have Linda. We'll have Fiona. We'll have Elizabeth. We'll have Elizabeth and we'll spell it wrong. We'll have Elizabeth. I'm running out of names here. We'll have Becky. We'll have, come on guys, give me a name. Give me some women, female names. My mind's went blank. We'll have Victoria. I'm just looking at my keyboard now and I saw V and went, what name starts with V? Okay, Victoria will do. Right. Oh, well, we did the same again, so we're going to have to do that. And that's going to be Matilda. And then we basically go through them and say they're female. And that one is female. Kyle. Oh, yeah, you're turning on your Terminator. Your inner Terminator, aren't you? But we can add that. We certainly can add that. We can say female. Right, Matthew, calm down, mate. Calm down. I'm not adding every single name there is. I'll add Kyle and that'll be that. Right, so we'll have Kyle. There we go. Right, so we've got 7 male, 6 female names. Now, the thing is that you could actually make this like 2 names. You could actually separate this into another date table for first names and second names. Right, and then you could basically join them together. So you could have like a list of second names, and then this name would be pulled from the second table. So you could have like McDonald, Jones, Smith, blah blah, whatever second names, and then it would actually randomize them. I've done it before. I did it with weapons. It was like I added a text together, so it was like sword of the, then it picked out a random word that was kind of an adjective, and then picked out another like class fantasy word, so it would end up like sword of the mighty fallen or blah blah blah, right? And it worked perfectly. It was, you know, it just made up names of stuff, and some of them sounded great and some of them sounded okay and blah blah blah. That's how you do it, right? But for this point, we don't care. All we want is a name and a sex, right? So what we can actually do here is we can go into our rocket, right? Which is the thing that basically creates our stuff, right? So you'll notice it basically, it goes in here, and this refresh supplies is basically the thing that creates all the different things in the rocket's inventory, right? So if I double click on that, you'll basically see that it goes through all of the things and sets up items. Okay? Now, we want to actually make this code a little more complicated so that it should actually simulate an economy a bit, right? But we're not doing that. Basically, we're just throwing items in there. We're basically looking at its inventory, which it already has, right? If you look, it's got, well, it's actually got nothing, right? But obviously, I must set that up somewhere. Right, let's see where that's set up. Right, that's the thing that makes it fly up and down. Right, but we obviously, yeah, here we go. So it's getting all the items, and then basically it adds them to the supply and then refreshes the supply. So basically it takes a list of every single item and adds it to this array, and then basically when it refreshes supplies, it comes in, gets the array, gets the item, and then basically picks a number between 1 and 100 and stuffs it into that quantity. Now, obviously that's not how you want to do it, because each item is basically going to have a rarity, right? But for the purposes of this, it was just to check it out. Okay, so basically now in our DT items, we're going to have a worker. Okay, now if I am correct, it should be in recipes. Okay, and if we add, this is going to be worker, now we're also going to have to add it to E items. As I said, I may split this out a bit so that it actually does this kind of separately, right? But for the moment we'll just make it like a building, except we obviously won't allow it to have a building. So we can select worker, the category, well actually the category is going to be a worker, but we'll leave that blank because it doesn't matter. The image is blank, mesh is blank, craft by hand, no is tradable, and I believe we want true in there. Okay, and the value is going to be, let's say 14,000. Research level, we're not interested in that. So now when we actually create the rocket, we should have a worker in the list. Now, as I said, we may want to keep this separate, right? But for the moment, we can come down here and we have worker, right? Now, you'll notice if we add one, it's going to be 14,000. Which is kind of exactly what we want. Now we're going to change that so we can actually buy a worker, okay? But we're going to have to do a special one with this. This is going to take a bit of time, guys, to set this all up. So bear with me on this one. we're going to have to go to our base building. And I'm going to have to stop it. So we're in our base building, and our base building is going to have a component, and that component is the worker component, right? So if we come in here, we can basically add this. Right, I did do that. There we go. Okay, and you'll notice that this component, if we open this component again, right, we've got this struct workers, which we don't, is struct worker comp. Now that's fine, okay? But the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to here, and we're going to add a variable, and we're going to say individual workers, right? And it's going to be made from this structure here, which is struct single worker, okay? So where was it? Not in there. So if we go back to here and we go up to here, then double click this again, this is going to be struct single worker, and it's going to be an array, okay? So now we can check that out. So now what we can do in our comp building worker, right, is we can create, wait a minute, we can say add, right, we're doing a custom event, right? We're doing a custom event. And we can say add single worker. Okay? Now, what we can do with this is we can now actually go and we can get a data table, right? We can get data table row names. Okay. Now, we've got the worker names. So, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a struct single worker. Okay? And we can basically do random int, random integer and range, Okay, so we can see 1 there. In fact, you know what we could do? We could do this a smart way, right? Right. What we could do is just get a row from the names, and then that can decide what the sex is, right? So we can basically do DT names, it's worker names, right? So that's going to get us them all, right? Then what we can do is we can basically say len to get the length. Then we can say -1, which will give us the start and end of our array. And then we can do random int in range. Then this becomes the maximum. And then we pull off here again. And we say copy. So we get a copy and we plug this into the index. So this gives us a random index from the names. So we now have a semi-random generator, okay? And now what we can do is we can break this. Okay, no we can't. So this gives us a row name, right? So basically then we say get data table row, which is always at the bottom. Okay, so we get the row now. Plug this in. And then that's the same worker names there. And now we can break this, and this is going to give us our break. And that is going to give us our name, and it's also going to give us our sex. Okay? And then what we can do is random int in range again. And we can basically say, let's say the youngest is 18, oldest is 62, just making numbers up here. And then we can plug that in there. And then what we can do is we can get the array of individual workers, and we can add. We don't want to add unique because there could be 2 Vickies that are 42, and that is that. So we just plug that in there. And plug that in there, or at least try to do it properly. So we plug that into there, then we can straighten this up. Okay, so basically all we're going to do is when they buy something from the ship, the controller will decide if it's a worker, right? it's obviously going to do something different. Okay, it's not going to add it to an inventory. What it's going to do, well, it's going to take it away from the inventory of the ship, but when it adds it, it's not going to add it to the inventory of the player. What it's going to do is it's going to go around all the buildings and find out where that worker needs to go. Okay? So that's the thought process going on there. Okay, and then when it does that and it gets the building, it's going to fire this on the component. Okay? And then the actual building will actually generate the worker. Okay? As I said, in theory, this is enough for us to do what we want to do. But if you remember rightly, what I said was we might actually have the characters working or walking back and forward to work and stuff like that. So if we actually want to do that, we need this struct to change slightly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a variable, right? And it's going to be, let's make it as English friendly as possible, where I work, right? And this is going to be BP base building, but it's actually going to be a class reference. Okay. Hey Eric, how are you doing today? So this is going to be a base building, because what we're going to do is we're going to pass an object into it, so when they actually get assigned to a building, that becomes the place where they work. And if I have a place where they work, then I can actually use the AI to move them there and back. Okay? So the other idea here was to have like a housing complex where all the workers basically lived, which I haven't created yet. But in theory then, you would get the workers to walk back and forward from their house or from the housing complex to their place of work. Okay? And that's the logic behind that. So once we've saved that, we can go back to our worker comp, right? And you'll notice now that this has a where I work. Okay, so this should be get parent, or actually it should be that. And we can't do that. Cast to BP base building, and I'm beginning to think this might not be a class reference. Right, but we should be able to do that. Now, in theory, we'd have to put it up here. We might not need this as a class reference, okay? We might actually just need to get the blueprint. In fact, probably we do. In fact, I'm going to change that right now. So it was not there. So we just want that. And if we go to here again, nah, it was here. Right, get myself confused here. So we're getting the owner and we're not getting the class, so we'll delete that, and then this will just plug straight into here. Okay. So the question is, how are we going to test this? Well, we may as well add a button on the controller to do that for us, I suppose. So if we go to blueprints, and I think at this point the wife's about to go out, so I'm going to take a break for 2 minutes to say goodbye, and I shall have a cigarette, and we shall be back in a couple of minutes. Okay guys, we're back. So, is this complete yet? Yeah, it's complete. Right, here you go guys. Go to your marketplace, first Tuesday of the month, check for free for the month, and this month we have Big Office, which is basically a lot of assets for a huge office and lots of different tables and chairs and desks and all that stuff. We have the Advanced Action RPG, which I didn't look too much at, but it's got lots of stuff like maps in it. You can interact with stuff, chests and all that kind of stuff. It's got quests and various other things. We have MySQL integration, so if you want to integrate to a database, then you can do that. It all comes with blueprints. We have the storage house set, which is the one I downloaded there. We can have a look at it in a second, because it's got some boxes and containers and stuff that might actually be useful in my game. And then we have the cartoon water shader, which is basically what it says on the tin. It's a cartoon water shader. If you click on it, you can have a look. No, it's actually about 5 assets, but you can see there. Looks nice for cartoony thing. It's got the underwater, and that's you. You get a tree and a bridge or a jetty and a waterfall and a brick and a boat and a box and a grass and a house. Okay, so for anybody that's new to Unreal Engine, as I said earlier, first Tuesday of the month, look, there's always like 4 or 5 free assets. Just go down, add them to your cart, and they get put in your library. And yeah, hopefully that's of some useful information for some people, and we shall get back to our worker. So back here, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, by the way. I am going to close that whole thing down and clean it up, and then open this afresh, right? So we are going to our event graph, and we have our testing buttons. Okay, this is a question I get asked quite frequently in a number of different ways. Would you recommend Unreal Engine 4 or Unreal Engine 5? If you've never used either of them, probably Unreal Engine 5, right? Because by the time you actually make your game, then probably it'll be stable enough. You will note that they say don't make any production games made in Unreal Engine 5 at this point, right? Which is a bit of a misnomer, because as far as I'm aware, Fortnite is made in Unreal Engine 5. A heavily modified version, but it's an Unreal Engine 5 all the same, right? So I would say if you're starting off, then go for it, Unreal Engine 5. Now, here's the caveat. There's still a lot of plugins for Unreal Engine that don't work in Unreal Engine 5. And if you're new to Unreal Engine in general, you're probably not going to know how to update them yourself. So you're just going to have to wait on everybody else updating them for you, which might never happen. Okay, so that is a downside. Get all actors class. Right, so there's a downside. The other downside is, from my experience, it makes sense, but it runs my GPUs about 5 to 10 degrees hotter, right? So normally my machine will run at about 50 degrees, or between 40 and 50, low 40s to high 40s, right? I've noticed that in Unreal Engine 5 it runs about 60, right? Which is still not a problem, but as random guy just said, my poor old PC can't handle Unreal Engine 5, right? Now, there's only three differences between Unreal Engine 5 and Unreal Engine 4.27. Okay? Now, here's the differences. Unreal Engine 5 has Lumen and Nanite. And the other difference is the user interface has been updated. That's the three differences. Otherwise, it's exactly the same, as far as I'm aware. I mean, it's going to change as it goes, as new versions come out. But when Unreal Engine 5, the first version came out on Unreal Engine 5, it was basically Unreal Engine 4.27 with the user interface updated and Lumen and Nanite added. Okay? So, in summary, if you're a new user and your computer can handle it, I would just start with Unreal Engine 5. If you use plugins that you already use in Unreal Engine 4 and you upgrade to Unreal Engine 5, you'll need to make sure that your plugins still work, because if they don't, you're screwed. Okay? We're getting all actors of class here, so hopefully that answered your question, Obito. If it didn't, then let me know and I'll try and answer it in a different way. So we want to get all the base buildings, right? And we can all feel sorry in the chat for random guy. Then we're going to do a for each loop on this. And my dog is losing its shit over something outside. Give me a second, guys. Okay, I got a little bit shouty there. Right, so what we're doing is we're getting all the base buildings, right? Now, this isn't the most efficient way of doing this, but because it's just a test here. Well, random guy, just work on mobile games. Oh, that felt dirty after saying that. Right, so we're going to pull off here and yeah, you're just gradually adding caveats to this, aren't you, random guy? Next it will be, and it'll only run in black and white. Right, anyway, I'm losing my train of thought here. So what we're doing is getting we're getting all the buildings, right? And we just basically want to trigger the add. So we're gonna see if we can get we're gonna see if we can get a component. Right, and there's basically stuff going on outside my house. Hang on a second again, guys. I'm going to have to mute the mic. Okay, guys, sorry about that. So what we're doing is we're getting all our buildings, and basically we don't care if it's any kind of building. We're just doing it anyway. This is going to change anyway once we actually add it to the correct place. But we're just going to basically go in here, get all base buildings. If it's a base building, then it's going to add a single worker, and then we can basically check whether or not this actually has a worker or not, and then we're just going to check the code, right? So fundamentally, we just go into worker, we go into our comp building worker, and then we check this, right? So we add a breakpoint here, and then we check what button we actually set this to, then we reset it to something else, like, I don't know, like, up. Sounds good. So if we press play, right, now I'm not going to do this yet. Yeah, Albedo, we're all still learning, mate. It's not exactly the thing to be worried about. If you don't learn, you're not going to know how to use the system. So, and if you're just learning, then there's no reason why not to use Unreal Engine 5, because basically that negates the making actual games or production versions of the game in Unreal Engine 5. That's just not going to affect you, while you're learning. So as I said before, by the time it actually is ready for prime time, then you'll have learned enough to make your game, and it won't be an issue anymore. So now what we're going to do is, now this thing here is a base building, I think. This is a base building as well. So it's actually going to do this 3 times, but at least we shall find out if it works or not. So let's see. Well, it's definitely done something. Added a single worker, and we shall see who it decides for us. Okay, so it's Victoria, and she is nothing yet. She has no age. See, she is ageless. Well, she's actually 61. Okay, so name is Victoria. We can check it from here. Sex female, age is 61, and where I work is in the minor. Okay, sorry about that. There's people wandering about outside, and the dog's getting a bit upset, and he keeps barking. So, right. So probably a better way of doing this, right? Probably a better way of doing this, and to show you what is actually happening, is if I go into the base building, right? Well, these are both being shown, so I'll be able to show you from the actual game what is actually going on. Right, now I don't need to actually do any more than that. So what I can do is we can fire our probes. Okay, so that's going to send out our worker, or sorry, our base mining builder, and we can take off this breakpoint, right? Because we know that it works. But what we can do is we can zoom down to the bottom here, and then we've got our warehouse, right? That's one of them. Right, I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do is, at this point, I am going to hit the up button, which will create each of our workers, and then we can check to make sure they have been actually made. So if we select here, right, and then we go down to our comp building worker, we have our struct workers, and we have our one worker, which if that decides to light up, Jim, and he's 35. Okay, so that's the first building. Then we have our miner, who is basically going to be the same thing, and we have our comp building worker, and that's Matthew, male, 21. And finally, in the player base, we have exactly the same thing, and it's Scott, male, 25. So you can see there that we've created a random generator, okay, we've created a random generator for our workers, which you could apply to, like, if you had, say you were doing a fantasy game, you could do the exact same with monsters, right? Except in this case, we don't actually create a mesh, although we could do a mesh. We've not got any AI on them, which we could do to make them walk from work to the house, and then when it's time for them to walk back to work, they walk back to work. We could do that. But fundamentally, we're generating a character in the game, right? They don't have a physical form in the game, but they do exist in the game, right? Now, once we've done that, what we can actually do is update this struct, because this struct is the current workers, and the current workers is actually the number of workers in this array, okay? And then we have a max workers, okay? So the max workers is set by the building, and the dog's beginning to really annoy me now. Back in a minute, guys. Okay, sorry guys, I can only apologise once again. This is the first time this has happened on the stream. So what we could actually do to make this all fit together is we can get this right, and then we can set members in the struct. And we're going to set the current workers. Right, and it's basically going to be the length of this, length of the individual workers. Okay, and that keeps both of our variables in sync. So there we go, that's how we basically create random things in the game. As I said, if we were going to use a little more complicated and we had a mesh and we're going to use a transform, then we'd obviously add it to this array, but we'd actually spawn the actor. Okay? So we would actually create the actor at this part. But since it's not really a physical entity in the game, we don't need to do that at this point, but we certainly could. So, how does that affect things? Well, if I go to the base building, right, and you shall see the calculations within this. Right, and do we have the processing in here? I believe not. I hope you're enjoying the sound of the dog. It's really quite appealing. And by appealing, I mean annoying. Right, so fundamentally what we'll do is we will go into our BP miner, and this has got a process, okay? And you will notice here that we don't actually calculate this here. Do we? Yeah, set process. Okay, so this is where we're setting up our workers, and you'll see from that we have max workers, current workers. So what we do is get the current workers divided by the max workers, then basically divided by the mining speed, or 1 divided by the mining speed, and then that should fundamentally go into here. Okay, so what we can actually do in this case is check this value. Okay, so we can enable that, and then we can build a miner, and then we can update it, and we can check that our processing speed changes depending on our number of workers. So if I remember how to play the game, what we can do is we can click on that. Right, so he's going to go and get the miner, and then once the miner's built, I can hit the up key, and that's going to give us our new person. Now this, we may need to actually fire this. Okay. Well, what we can actually do in the meantime, right, so it's ran. Now here we have a time, and the time is 10. Okay, so that's okay. So basically what that means is every 10 seconds it's going to generate a new product. Okay, we've got our current workers. It's not giving us the values here. There's 1 and 10. Now I no idea. Oh yeah, I don't know where it gets that 1 from. I think that's the base value. But what we can do is we can resume, then we can create a worker. In fact, we can create 2 workers, but unfortunately this only gets set once. So what we actually need to do is, when this gets fired, we need to tell it to rerun set process. Okay, so the way we could do that is we can create an interface, right? So we'll do it in here. We'll create an interface, and it's going to be called BPI. Let's just call it what it's actually going to do. All it's going to do is set the process. Okay, so we open that up and we just say set, call it set new process time. Okay, so we can save that, and in our miner, which we have open, we can basically set this in all of our buildings. In fact, we'd be better setting it in the base building. Right? So what we can do here is add it in here. We actually should have done it here. So what we'll do is we shall add to this interface, and we shall say set new process time. Okay, and we can have a new input on it and say, we can call it current workers, and it's going to be an integer. Sorry guys, this is very unlike my dog to be barking like this. Okay, hopefully that's things settled down. Can't guarantee it. So basically, we're going to set a new process time. We're going to call it, except we're not. I always get these things mixed up. I think I can just drag that in. No, we can't. Learn a new thing every day. And it's not that one either, right? The one we're looking for is the little envelope. Right, so it's interface call. No, it's not. I never get this right. I get there in the end, but I never get this right. Which one is which? It's message. This is the one we want in the actual building. Right, so once we add a new person, we basically make an interface call to its parent. Okay. And I believe I've used this wrong. So we're going to delete that. Actually, we shouldn't have deleted that. Right. What we'll actually do is we'll put that back and we'll save it. Okay, so why you got an error? Yeah, it's got an error because it needs the parent or owner. So get owner. Right. And now if we go into our base building, or sorry, our miner, right, we can go down here and set new processing time, and it's the event, I believe. Yep. And this current workers isn't getting passed, which is weird, but anyway, we can delete that out of the interface. In fact, we'll do that now. Right. We shall, oh, that's not what we wanted to do. Right, we'll save that, because we can get this value anyway, so I'm not too worried about that. So we can refresh the nodes. Okay guys, it's getting a bit tedious, the dog barking all the time, but what can I do? Right, so when we're setting the process time, it's getting this. The comp worker, we are getting the comp worker current, so that's doing exactly what it should be doing, right? So basically when we add a worker, it's going to call the interface, which is going to fire on the base, on our base building, which is going to make it fire on our miner, and in theory it should work. So let's have a look. There's our mine. Here comes our mining constructor. And we can resume that. And then we'll hit our up key. And that should have fired. Which it didn't. And actually that's not going to work. That's not going to work because basically we are calling the owner of the... Let's have a look, right? Let's see what it actually says. So if we go into a comp, right, and we do this and we add a breakpoint here, we're going to check who the owner actually is. So if we do this and we hit the up key, the owner is the miner. Right, so that should work. Okay? So if we look at the miner now, and we add a breakpoint, and we basically resume, it's not calling this. Right, so it's doing that. Okay. Right, the only thing I can think of here is that it doesn't actually have the interface. Right? I'm going to stop it there, right? And I'm going to say, we're going to see if it's got the interface. Right? Now, the base building has got the BPI building interface, which means that the miner should have it as well, right? So if we go to class settings, it's got inherited building, right? So I don't know why this wouldn't be working, to be honest. We'll branch that, okay? Going to branch that. As you can tell, I'm not perfect and I do have my limitations, and not everything works first time for me. Right, so we're We're going to compile that. And we're going to see if it actually does implement that interface. Which it should. Right? Go to there, fire those. And I'm hoping so it's done that, which we expected. Okay. And now when I hit this, it comes to here. It says it's true. It is the miner. We step over that. We step into that. We can step over, step over, step over, whatever, whatever. We can resume that, resume that, resume that, resume that. And that's not firing. That interface is not firing. Anybody got any ideas on this one, guys? I'm sure maybe somebody out there's more experienced with interfaces and whatever. I'm an idiot. That's BPI set process, that's the wrong one. Right, okay. Right, I understand why it's not working now. So, basically, we can delete that. We'll cancel that, right? Then we'll compile it. And then we'll delete this. And it's still saying there's a reference there, but go away. Force delete. Go away. So basically what happened there was I was actually calling the wrong interface because we added it to BPI building, but I actually done it in here with the set process when we didn't really need the set process. Right, and this is probably going to take about 10 minutes to delete this for some reason. There we go. Right, so what we need here is set new process time, and it's going to be message, and that's not it. Don't know why I went that way. Okay. Now my browser's coming up and saying that I'm not streaming or something properly. Set new process time. That's new output. That's interface call. So it's not that one. It should be the interface. It's not that one. It's not the interface call. It's not right. Okay. Interface call. And it's not that. It should be, it's a message. I always get myself right. That's it. Ah, I'm losing my shit here because the dog's losing it, and I'm losing it, and everybody's losing it here. Process time. And now the neighbour very kindly is making noises back at my dog, which was making my dog even worse. Yeah, you can tell, guys, it's all going well today. Right, it's not. It's a message. Why is it not coming up with a message? Right. I'm losing track of what I'm doing here. My dog's annoying me, everybody's annoying me. Oh, set new process time. Where is the message? Where's the message? Have I done goofed here? Yeah, we've got BPI building, which is right. No, we don't want to do that. Does it give us another option here? No. I think I may have to actually shut this down and reopen it. I think I've screwed it up because of the other interface. So that's new input. Process, but it doesn't allow me to send the message. Okay, so whatever's going on here has went a bit haywire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save everything. I'm going to close it, and then I'm going to reopen it. As I said, my train of thought is being completely thrown by the fact that there's people outside and they're annoying my dog, and my dog's barking, and then they're making noises back at my dog when it barks, and everything's going to shit, and I'm losing. Anyway, could only happen on a live stream. Okay, so meanwhile, everything is well with the world. And if we go to worker, building worker, and this opens up in its own time. I'm probably going to end up deleting this actually, because I don't think anybody will want to hear a dog barking for half the stream. Okay, so the question is, we don't have this thing. Where is the interface message? I don't understand. Right, we're going to say no. right? We're going to delete that and that because we know it does exist if we actually add it, right? What we'll do is we'll do that. We'll go to class settings, add BPI building. We'll save that. We're going to check our BPI building. There's set new process time. That's all good. So we say set new we've got this which is not it, right? Let's bring them all out and see what options we've got here, right? So we've got that one, we've got this one, and that's not the right one because that's target is comp building worker. And interestingly, right, that's just not the right one anyway. Set new process time, which is the event, right? Which is the one that's from the building. Okay? Okay guys, I'm gonna end the stream at this because that's the dog started again, and basically I'm going to figure out why we aren't able to send the message, and we shall come back and we shall sort it out tonight at 8 Central. Sorry about the noise, but hey ho, can't stop things, can't stop life. So bye bye for now.